Hey there folks, how you doing today? Hope all is going well for you. Now before we go any further folks, let me show you this is a safe and empty weapon. Also, there is no ammunition for this rifle out here where we're working, and we're going to keep it that way throughout this production. So for those of you that are not familiar with what this is our Alaskan rowboat rifle. This is the one my dad brought back from Kivalina, Alaska, that he purchased from a local up there. It was in very bad condition. By the time I got a hold of it, it was in a bag with pieces thrown everywhere. I literally had to put it together. I had to manufacture parts for it. And here recently, we finally got it put together and shootable with a Vortex Vanquish scope. For those of you that did not see that video, I'll put a link to it up so that you can go back and see it. But for the more observant of you, you probably have already picked up on the fact that this is not a Vortex Vanquish scope. No, this is a Vortex Diamondback HP scope, which is considerably more glass than a Vortex Vanquish. Now, there is a reason why we changed those out. Some of you may remember that the group sizes we were getting from our original range session with this rifle were less than satisfactory at 100 yards. Those groups were shot using Hornady 100 grain American Whitetail 243 ammunition. They just were substandard, and I was not happy at all with the group size I was getting out of this rifle. Now, with that being said, I wasn't sure if the problem was the ammunition or the optic, or possibly the shooter. But what I did know after that first range session using the Vortex Vanquish was the crosshairs, which are a dead hold bullet drop compensating reticle. And for those of you that don't know what that is, I'll put up an image of it here. Basically, it's a crosshair that has some little hash marks on it for holdover and distance adjustment. The viewability of the crosshairs in that scope, for me, was very bad. The crosshairs seemed kind of fuzzy and distorted. I did what I could to adjust the diopter ring on that scope, but it just did not work well for me. Could have just been me, could have been the combination of my old eyes and that low quality glass. But I felt as though the bad groups that we got with the rifle were probably at least partially at fault with the Vortex Vanquish scope, so I took it off and I put this one on here. Well, I've got good news and bad news about that. So I want to put this heavy rifle down so I can finish telling you. So as I mentioned before, there were at least two variables at play that could have been affecting our not so great accuracy. One of them, of course, was the ammunition. The other one, as I talked about ad nauseum, was the optic. And in a perfect world, I would have adjusted one, took it back to the range, evaluated how the rifle performed, and moved forward from there. Understand a couple of things. For one, it cost money to go to the range. More importantly, it cost time to go to the range. My trip to get there alone, not counting anything else, is 1 hour round trip. So making frequent back and forth trips just isn't really feasible given my busy schedule. I wanted to set myself up for the best possible outcome from the range session, taking that rifle back out to the range. So I did a couple of things. One, I took an additional box of this Hornady American Whitetail ammunition because I wanted to see how it performed through the rifle. Secondly, I made up some hand loads using some very good data that I had and a proven powder for the 243 Winchester. So what happened? So I got out to the range, I got the rifle zeroed in pretty quickly, set the target out at 100 yards, and something really cool happened. I don't know how well you can see this. I will put up a still of it here in a minute. But what we're dealing with on this target is two 5-shot groups. These 5 rounds right here, which is maybe about 1.25 inches, just under 1.5 inches, center to center across the widest part of the group, came from the hand-loaded ammunition that I made for this rifle. These 5 shots up here, which look similar to our initial range results, came from the Hornady American Whitetail ammunition. Now, I'm not knocking that ammunition in particular, it just doesn't seem to shoot well through this gun. But let me tell you what, my first attempt at a hand load for it gave us just over 1 MOA. So realistically, I probably didn't need to change that scope. The fact that it has the Vortex Diamondback HP scope on it now is just icing on the cake in terms of what we were trying to achieve with this rifle. Now, one other thing I'll mention, and I failed to before, and I apologize for that. The optical quality for the Diamondback HP scope as opposed to the Vanquish scope is a night and day difference. And I'm not just saying that. It really was a lot easier for me to use this scope out at the range than the Vanquish scope. So while there didn't appear to be anything wrong with the Vanquish scope, and the group size between the 2 scopes using the Hornady American Whitetail ammunition, there was little or no difference, maybe a little shift in point of impact. But I said that to say this, you could get by just fine with that Vortex Vanquish scope. The Diamondback is definitely a little better scope and much easier on my old eyes. Take that for what it's worth. So what that means is our next trip to the range with this rifle will involve some fine tuning to that hand load that we developed last time. Because as I mentioned in earlier videos, the ultimate goal with this rifle is sub-minute of angle groups. Based on the results from the initial hand load and the initial range session with this scope rifle package, I think we're going to get it there next time. Regardless, with no further tweaking the ammunition, we are ready for deer season this fall. So thank you for following along with me on our continued journey with this rifle. Take care. God bless.